Welcome to the Mount Pleasant podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant podcast. Mount Pleasant is a growing community, Mount Pleasant Magazine, a growing publication, and the Mount Pleasant podcast growing as well. Thank you so much for taking a little time to join me. I'm Brian Cleary, and back in 2011, the Get Carried Away Southern Market opened in Pawleys Island. A dozen years later now, it's expanding into Mount Pleasant. So as part of our Growing with Mount Pleasant series here on the Mount Pleasant podcast, I thought we'd talk to the owner of that market, and we welcome Brian Henry. Brian, first of all, thanks for taking your time to join us today.
It is my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, Brian.
Now, you've got this market in Pawleys Island, the Get Carried Away Southern Market. For someone who's not familiar with the market, take a minute here. How would you describe what that market is?
I would say that Get Carried Away is a place where locals and vacationers can come and get prepared meals, a little touch of the low country. It's very Southern what we serve. We have casseroles, dips, appetizers, desserts, chicken salad, good old Southern recipes. It's a place where you can take a load off, come get a good meal, come get a bottle of wine and settle in for the evening or settle in for the week if you're renting a house on Pawleys, or soon to be if you're renting a house on Sullivan's Island. We're going to be a great place for you to come and load up.
So it's low country Southern takeout. So you're talking about all my favorites. And let's stipulate here, these are all going to be fat-free, gluten-free, calorie-free. So we don't have to worry about that. Just they all taste good.
Bingo. But you have to think tomato pies. That's one of our specialties, fresh tomatoes. Palmetto cheese is a secret ingredient in our tomato pies. Low country boils, we started those back in 2011 when we first opened the store here in Pawleys Island. That's got your traditional steamed shrimp, potatoes, corn, onions, garlic, lemons, the traditional. That's a big seller of ours. Also think chicken salad, as I mentioned before. That's our number one seller. And the reason it's so good is because we keep it simple. It's got 4 ingredients. It's got a good texture to it. And then we also make really good chicken perlo. I don't know, some people like chicken bog, some people like chicken perlo, but we've done chicken perlo from day one as well. And it's a crowd pleaser, and it's something that we do very well.
Now, let me touch on it just a little bit because we don't want to go down a rabbit hole or anything, but you're somewhat known because of cheese. Explain that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, my wife and I were huge baseball Braves fans back in the mid-'90s when we both lived in Atlanta. And my wife back then would make a pimento cheese recipe for all of the tailgaters that would come to our tailgate. And when we moved to Pawleys Island in 2002, we took over a bed and breakfast on the beach called Seaview Inn. And my wife would make that recipe for our low country boils on Wednesday evenings. It was an appetizer that our guests love. And so around 2007, we decided people love it so much, let's maybe try to make a commercial run at it. So we began producing a very modest number of Palmetto cheese containers back at that time. And since then, it has grown to 9,000 grocery stores, and 40 states across the United States. So we're proud of it. It's had a great run, and Palmetto cheese is kind of a nationwide thing. And to be honest, it's helped to put Pawleys Island even more on the map. Pawleys Island was a national brand, but it really put it on the map.
So here we are now, 12 years later. We're talking on the Mount Pleasant podcast. This is our Growing with Mount Pleasant segment with Brian Henry, who is the owner of the Get Carried Away Southern Market.
Well, Brian, you know as well as I do that Mount Pleasant is absolutely a growing area. And for us, as I mentioned before, prepared foods is something that we do very well. And young families are a mainstay in Mount Pleasant. And those young people are also more quality conscious shoppers and such. So that's one of the things that we do very well. Secondly, the location in Moultrie Plaza, as you know, on Coleman Boulevard across the street from Moultrie Middle School, is a phenomenal location. And it came available. It's been vacant for a long time. It was the old Wild Wing Cafe,
Yes,
I believe.
old Wild Wing, yes.
And so we felt good about that location. And Mount Pleasant really just for us has a very hip and a good vibe about it. And that kind of fits who we are. And of course, we love Shem Creek. We love to go down to Water's Edge and Nico. And it's just a great spot. We love it. And we think it's going to be a perfect fit for Get Carried Away.
That is a great area, Mount Pleasant, there on Coleman Boulevard. Plus, in that old Wild Wing, you got lots of free parking there, so it'll be convenient for folks to come down.
Podcasting has exploded in popularity, especially local podcasts. As of 2022, 62% of Americans have listened to a podcast. 38% have listened in the last month. 26% in the last week. The podcasting audience is booming with no signs of slowing down. Call the podcast hotline to be featured on these podcasts or to receive information about podcast marketing. Call 843-530-0403 or visit carolinapodcasts.com.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Now, there are some people, because Pawleys Island, it's a Hammock community, part of the coast here, just up from Highway 17. So there's certainly plenty of locals who have visited the Pawleys Island location. Tell me a little something that'll be different or new, maybe unique to the new Mount Pleasant location.
That's a great question, Brian. I appreciate you asking that, because the location in Pawleys Island, we've always kind of joked around and said, hey, we're a takeout restaurant. So you need to come in, get your stuff and go, because we don't have any seating. That's going to be different at the Moultrie location, because not only will we have some seating on the inside, but we've got a deck outside with a number of tables, some sofas and chairs, where you can come in the morning. If you're dropping off your kids from school, you can come grab a cup of coffee and sit and relax. Or if you want to come for lunch, we'll have soups and salads and sandwiches available, so you can come out but also importantly, that if you're a young person and you've got a family at home and you want to come and have a glass of wine or a beer, late afternoon, early evening, and then after you're done, just grab dinner for your family and head home. It's going to be a great way to do that. And then secondly, one of the things we've started doing more of here in Pawleys is providing more entertainment options, like tabletops and napkins and platters and such themed items and holiday gifting and stuff. We do that to some degree here, but we're going to do that, a lot more of that, and we'll have a lot more space to do that in the Moultrie location.
And so for people who are thinking, okay, great, takeout meals, this is going to be perfect. There's also a side to what you do in terms of partying, because make entertaining easy. It's a line that's on your website. You make it so that, hey, and let's face it, people in Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island, on Shem Creek, we all like to throw parties. We like to have charcuterie, all that kind of stuff. You can help me out with this?
Yeah, big time. That is a big focus of ours. We do a lot of that here in Pawleys Island. And not only parties, but think about where we live. Pawleys Island, Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island, people that live in those areas, we're always hosting people. They come to visit us. They're on vacation. So when that happens, you got to be ready for those folks and have plenty of food for them to eat and a way to entertain them. That is exactly what Get Carried Away is made to do, is make your entertaining, your hosting of guests as easy as possible. And that's who we are.
We're talking with Brian Henry today on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. Thanks so much for sharing a little time with me, Brian Cleary. This is where the pages of Mount Pleasant magazine come alive. And this is our Growing with Mount Pleasant series, part of the Mount Pleasant Podcast, as the Get Carried Away Southern Market that originated in Pawleys Island. Now, and Brian, so everybody knows, your Pawleys Island location will still be open. This is just a growth of your markets.
That is exactly right. The Pawleys Island location has been open since 2011, as you mentioned, and we've grown substantially, but we feel like our concept plays well in other coastal cities like Mount Pleasant. One day I see us being up in Columbia. That's a good market for us, maybe Greenville. But we see our offering as coastal oriented. I mean, it's southern, it's low country, it's got some seafood. And one thing I didn't mention, Brian, is that the location that we'll have in Mount Pleasant also will have a large, not a large, but a curated selection of wines. We've been to Bottles. It's going to be our neighbor. We're not competing with them. That's a great store. our selection is going to be much smaller, but curated. These are wines that we love, that we've tried, that we've sampled, that we feel like, if you come and shop with us and you want to have a one-stop shop, pick up dinner and glass, bottle of wine. We'll also have craft beers and such, but we're a much smaller version of that. But yeah.
So to get carried away Southern Market, so you have people coming to Pawleys Island on vacation, they visit you, you have online ordering. Do you find that somebody goes back to Baltimore after being down in South Carolina and you're filling orders still? Folks take that home with them, right?
They do. Sometimes they'll pack a cooler and head back home to Maryland or North Carolina. And then when they run out, they go right online and order from us. That's a growing business for us, and it's something that we want to continue to pursue. But you're not buying crab divine, tomato pies, chicken perlo up in those areas. So we're happy to oblige.
If you are buying it up there, let's be honest, it's fake. It's not the real stuff. So we've got people from all over who are familiar with the market, and you yourself. There's a lot of items on your menu. If somebody goes online, they can check out what's on there. The cheese is obviously one of the specialties, but give me something that you yourself, that you go, this might be a sleeper item. Maybe people don't realize it. I really like this one. Give me one.
Shrimp and crab dip is something that we do it's tasty, and we always have it on the table when we have our parties. King Ranch chicken dip is one of my favorites, and I think it's one of my wife's favorites too. And when we began to distribute Palmetto cheese, and later on in the game, we started doing buffalo style chicken dip, jalapeno popper dip. Those are packaged items, but in our store, those are more like heat up dips in casserole dishes. And that's the real deal. And to me, those items, buffalo style chicken dip, jalapeno popper dip, King Ranch chicken dip, if you're hosting and you want just an absolute banger appetizer, you can't beat those things. And again, I mentioned the shrimp and crab dip. That's a cold dip. And that's probably one of my favorite things that we sell, even though it's not a bestseller, it's one of my favorites.
And I should have apologized for that question up front, because that's kind of like asking, which is your favorite kid? I know you got a lot of good things there, but I just tried to pin you down on one. Now, Brian, people may not realize, or maybe they do, or maybe they hear the name and go, wait, I've heard that name. You kind of have a secret identity, a second job. I don't know how you do it. So maybe time management you could teach me a little bit about, but you are also the mayor of Pawleys Island. How long have you served in that role?
I have been the mayor for 3.5 years here at Pawleys Island, and it is an unpaid volunteer position. And the only reason that I decided to do that is because I love this place so much. My wife and I have been here for, 22 years. We've got a bed and breakfast on the island. We just feel so strongly about our life here and what Pawleys Island means, not only to the residents and the property owners, but the people that visit the island. It's so special. It's so historic. I feel honored to be the mayor. I feel like it's something that I want to do for a while longer. But as you mentioned, as far as time management, I think the key to that is whether it be your business, our Seaview Inn, or get carried away. We've got great people that work for us. We try to take care of them, and it allows me a little bit more flexibility to take on additional responsibilities. So thanks,
Brian. You and your wife
that.
Have been in Pawleys Island now. You just said 22 years. Give us a little bit about your background. Where did you start out at?
So not to go too far back, but I'm an LSU graduate. I grew up in Louisiana, moved after I graduated in electrical engineering to Atlanta, Georgia, where I worked as a consultant for a big six consulting firm. And then I moved over and worked for Coca-Cola for a number of years in some management positions, operations, et cetera, customer service, and did a little bit of, after that, a few years of technology consulting. But back in 2002, my wife and I decided, the big city life with 2 small children was a little hectic, a little competitive. Maybe we needed a change of pace. And so we got on a wing and a prayer and moved to Pawleys Island and took over this tiny bed and breakfast, rustic old inn on the beach, Seaview Inn at Pawleys Island. It's 20 rooms, no air conditioning, don't allow cell phones, no televisions. It's an old Pawleys throwback inn, and we went for it. And it's been a blessing to us. It's been good to us. It's been the genesis of Get Carried Away, really, the idea, and also Palmetto cheese as an appetizer being served there. So it's been incredible. But I've always been involved in this community. I was planning commission for 8 years, 4 years as chair, 7 years as the Booster Club president. I announced all the high school football games for a number of years. And now I guess I've decided to get more closer to home with the town of Pawleys Island and being mayor. And I enjoy it. I really feel like if you're on the sidelines and complaining about things, then you're not doing the right thing. You got to get in the fray and try to make a difference. And that's what I've done here since we moved here.
Amen to that. Well, the Get Carried Away Southern Market, you and your wife are obviously partners, teammates in this. Does this extend beyond that with your family or your kids involved?
Not so much. The kids have been involved at CVUN. They've worked there and carried luggage and checked in guests and taken reservations. And then they've also moved over and to Get Carried Away and worked the register and did some stocking. But they've moved on. I've got an older daughter who graduated from SMU. My oldest daughter graduated from SMU and lives down in Tampa now and doing very well. And then my youngest just graduated 2 weeks ago from SMU. She's back home for a little while. She's going to help us get this new location in Mount Pleasant open, help us do some social media, help us get organized a little bit. And she's going to be a great asset to us. I don't know how long she's going to do that, but we need her right now. I can tell you that.
Now, I have to ask, because you did say LSU, you celebrated a national championship a couple of years ago. Are you allowed to wear those colors? I mean, you're in Gamecock Tiger country these days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't boast too much about it, but I'm a passionate LSU fan. I don't know if you heard, but Joe Burrow, I think yesterday, it was just announced that he's going to be the highest NFL player in the history of the game. I think $54 million a year. He was the man at LSU. I mean, he and those wide receivers and Clyde Edwards-Helaire brought us a national championship. And I tell you, I love LSU sports. It's baseball season now, so I'm tuned into the SEC tournament, and hopefully my team gets to Omaha. And South Carolina's got a great team too, and Clemson. I don't want to leave them out. They're red hot as well. I love sports, and I'm definitely in Clemson Tiger Gamecock country, but it's all in good fun. And I've got a lot of friends that went to school there.
Well, you can say you're a Tiger fan, and people can take that, in any number of ways and kind of get away with it.
True.
So we're looking forward. We're talking with Brian Henry today on Mount Pleasant Podcast. He is the owner, along with his wife, at the Get Carried Away Southern Market that's moving into Mount Pleasant. This is part of our Growing with Mount Pleasant segment here on Mount Pleasant Podcast. So, Brian, one of the things that we always like to talk about, a new business comes to town. That means there's more jobs for Mount Pleasant. You're going to be employing some Mount Pleasant residents.
We are, and we're excited about that. And it's the staff we have here. There's probably about 12 to 14, full-time that run this store. We're looking at upwards of 30 to 35. It's a much larger location. We're going to need prep cooks, line cooks, inventory management personnel. We're going to need probably some assistant manager level people, people that work the register, eventually some bartenders for the outside bar area as we grow that. As I mentioned before, the porch outside, when we initially open, may not be fully functional. It'll be a place to sit and such, but probably in time for college football season, that'll be a hot spot for coming and having a limited menu, I guess, of some of our offerings, but wine and beer, and it'll be a great place to hang out and watch some football games and maybe pregame for going out later that night. So,
can you explain to me what arrogantly shabby is?
I can. Pawleys Island is considered to be one of the oldest resorts on the East Coast, and that's because some of the old properties, plantation properties, literally went from the river to the ocean. And during the summer times, the planters would bring all of their families over to the island to get away from the malaria and the heat and the mosquitoes and all of that. And so that's been dating back to the early 1800s. And so Pawleys Island literally has no commercial entities on the island. There are two inns on the island, one of which is Seaview Inn, the other one is Pelican Inn. But there's no restaurants, there's no stores. It's all old rustic houses. We take pride in the fact that when you vacation on Pawleys Island, the number one thing to do here is absolutely nothing. Sit in a rocking chair, lay in a hammock, read a book, go out on the creek dock, enjoy a glass of wine, watch the sunset. That is our claim to fame. Not there's golf off island and such, and there's great restaurants off island, but the island itself, and Seaview Inn is a great example of that. It's just old school, open windows, slamming screen doors, arrogantly shabby. We're proud of that, and that's something that's a moniker that we all embrace.
So we're excited about the new market coming to Mount Pleasant. First of all, the economic impact is going to be great. As you said, we'll be adding some jobs, the amazing menu and the food and the takeout meals we're going to get. If you go on your website right now, and the video is a little dated because obviously you shot a little while ago, I have to think the construction has progressed beyond what I see there. And I know we don't have an exact date, but what's your hope in terms of when folks in Mount Pleasant are going to be able to actually experience the market?
So it took a while for us to get a permit to start construction. But once we've got started, it's going very well. We initially hoped to open sometime in late June, early July. It's looking like middle of July, maybe late July. I think August 1st would be the latest. And I know we teased that with the video to say, hey, we're coming. And we're doing our level best to make that happen. There's a lot to be done. The building has been vacant for 4 years. So there's some things that we've uncovered that had to be fixed as well. But I will say this, when it's all said and done and we get finished, it's going to be a very, very nice, attractive, finished space that I think when the first shoppers come in, they're going to be really surprised at how attractive it is, how opening and welcoming it is. And we can't wait to get open. We're excited.
And it seems to me you and your wife, you've got the inn, you've got the Pawleys Island store, you're expanding. It's not like oh my gosh, I have nothing to do. I need to do something. This seems like the markets for you is kind of a labor of love, something that you really want to do.
Yeah, it is. We've got a nephew who's working for us. He played baseball at Auburn, and he's a very intelligent, smart young man, and he's working for us now, and he's anxious to, get down to the store and manage that. Secondly, my wife and I, we entertain a lot, whether it be at Seaview Inn or our home. We like to entertain. And so this is a labor of love for us. We have a really good sense for what it takes to host and entertain groups of people. And so we want to make it easier for folks to do that. And then thirdly, we hired a couple from Atlanta, Georgia. They moved here back in August thinking we were probably going to open a lot sooner than we have, but they've been a big help to us. And they've moved, like I said, to North Charleston area. So yeah, it's my wife and I work together a lot. We kind of work on separate paths sometimes, but yeah, it is a labor of love for us. I will say that.
Now you guys spend a lot of time together. How long have you been married?
We've been married 26 years tomorrow.
Wow. We obviously must like each other because you're around each other all the time, which can be a good thing, or some marriages would say, well, maybe a little too much.
Well, she would tell you, and I would tell you that when we first started dating, I'd been single a long time, and she had just gotten divorced and signed her divorce papers the day we met. So there was a little bit of friction there. Neither one of us wanted to get into a serious relationship. So I would say the first few years dating and the first few years of marriage was probably when we fought the most. But it didn't take us long to figure it out that we love each other and we get along well. We have similar goals, very similar interests, and we've made a good go of it. And she's one of the hardest working people that I know, and her fingerprints are all over Get Carried Away, because I would say 80 to 90% of the recipes across the board are influenced and or created by her. Palmetto cheese also was a recipe that she created. So very proud of her and who she is and how hard she works and her vision for things.
Got a great teammate there. I can't wait to try. So lunches, dinners. It's low country Southern takeout, but it's more than that. It's the tomato pies. It's the party. It's even, hey, you're going out on the boat fishing. You've got family over, things like that. You can help me out, right?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. We're in the middle of boating country. I'm a big boater myself, and there are fishing tournaments. There's a big fishing tournament here in Georgetown this weekend, and most of those boaters that come in, they get dips, casseroles, snacks. They come to see us, and we can totally hook them up, and we can do the same in Mount Pleasant.
Going to be a convenient location right there by Shem Creek. So, Brian, if people want to check out and get an early idea of what's going to be in that store, they can get a lot of information, including the menus and stuff on the website, correct?
Absolutely can. We'll keep updating when our opening will be on Facebook. Our website is being totally revamped over the next 3 to 4 weeks as well. So, you absolutely can see our full menu on the website now. It's just going to look a little bit different and be reskinned and rebranded pretty soon.
Get Carried Away Southern Market. It's coming to Mount Pleasant. We're talking about new jobs for the area, but we're talking about some great food. It's a store that you won't want to miss in the Moultrie Plaza there in the old Wild Wing. And Brian, again, so we're going to see you open these doors sometime mid to late summer.
Yeah, I would say mid to late July, and we're pushing hard. We want to get it done. We want to get open because I know Mount Pleasant is going to be proud of this location. I really do.
We are ready for it. The Get Carried Away Southern Market. It's part of our Growing with Mount Pleasant segment here on the Mount Pleasant podcast. Should I refer to you? Does anybody come in the store and go, Mayor Henry, can you give me a tomato pie there?
Yes, they do a lot. I don't know how I feel about that, but I try to keep a low profile. But yeah, they do. They do, and I'm happy to be there. It's great to be across the counter, step across the counter, and interact with people. And again, we live in such an awesome community, and I know Mount Pleasant is in the same vein as that. So we're excited to be there.
We're ready to welcome you. Brian Henry, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate you bringing us up to date on what's going to be a great addition to the Mount Pleasant cuisine.
Brian, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Look forward to driving down Coleman Boulevard, pulling into Moultrie Plaza, and experiencing the new Get Carried Away Southern Market, their second location. Brian Henry, who also doubles as the mayor of Pawleys Island, our guest today. Thank you so much for joining me for this segment, our Growing with Mount Pleasant series, part of the Mount Pleasant podcast, where the pages of Mount Pleasant magazine come alive.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.